see. Turn over to you. I know you've got a few remarks.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Okay. And we'll jump right in. I've got sort of my Q&A. Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to OCBO's Roundtable discussion of diversity in government advertising, which is part of the FCC and OCBO's ongoing series on supplier diversity. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm the director of FCC's Office of Communications and Business Opportunities. And on behalf of Chairman Wheeler and the commissioners, I extend their greetings. Commissioners O'Reilly, Rosenwurzel, and Pai, and Chairman Wheeler, who are unable to join us today, but they do extend their greetings. We're hopeful that Commissioner Clyburn will join us. She's got a conflict this morning, but I think she'll be stopping in, so hopefully she'll be able to say hello. And so we look forward to that. For those of you unfamiliar with OCBO, it's our mission within the FCC to safeguard the interests of small and diverse businesses, counseling chairman and commissioners on the impact of our regulatory policy on the competitive interests of small and diverse businesses and communications and media companies. We also use our platform to connect small businesses to capital. Many of you who have joined us before have been at our annual Access to Capital conferences. We enjoy putting those on. We also have a much broader annual Supplier Diversity Conference, which focuses on government opportunities, private sector opportunities in the contracting arena, and this is a part of that initiative. So we use our platform to connect small businesses and diverse businesses to capital, to industry relationships, just as I mentioned, and also to the best information that enables them to navigate the FCC's regulatory processes. So before I move on, I'd like to thank all of you for coming this morning. We look forward to a very lively discussion. I'd like to thank all of our panelists who've joined us this morning and taken time out of their busy schedules to participate. Have joining us in no particular order, I've just got it here, Mr. Sherman Kizart, who has been with us before with Kizart Media Properties, Mr. Steve Roberts, who is with the Roberts Companies, Melody Spann-Cooper with WVON Chicago. Although, I always think of it as WVON Chicago. There's probably a more official name, but to me it's always WVON Chicago. On the phone joining us is Chanel Bankston Carter. She's with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Chanel, can you hear us? Are you there? Are we connected to you? I think we'll see to make sure that we're connected to Chanel. Alice Williams with the Department of Defense. Leslie Jean with the Department of Transportation. Tim Smith with our own FCC's Procurement Office. My colleague next to me, Jim Winston, is the President and CEO of the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters, who will be helping me moderate. My colleagues in OCBO, Deputy Director Carolyn Fleming-Williams and Associate Director Calvin Osborne will also be participating. So, as I've said before, this discussion is part of our Supplier Diversity Initiative. But unlike our annual conferences on government and private sector spending practices, we wanted to have a more laser-like focus on federal advertising spending. The Congressional Research Service has found that in recent years the federal government spends close to $1 billion annually on advertising services. The focus of our meeting today is an examination of how, where, and in many instances why this money, these dollars are being spent, and how we might begin to expand the pool of vendors who assist the government in getting out its message. So, public documents reveal who's spending the money, but they don't always reveal who's on the receiving end of those contracts. So we want to delve into that a bit. Experience tells us that local media, small companies, women and minority-owned media are not well represented in that number. But one of the challenges is that the documents, again, don't necessarily tell us the exact picture. So we've got procurement experts here today, experts in media who are going to talk about that and see if we can delve into some solutions. Again, our purpose is not to indict, but to gain a better understanding of the process, why perhaps federal advertising dollars are not more broadly spread out, and how women and minority-owned media companies might be able to improve government advertising to underserved communities. So a little bit of housekeeping. We've envisioned this as a true roundtable. In other words, it's not analog. We're looking for all of our panelists to have a robust conversation, to engage with each other, and it's not just we're speaking out on particular questions and limited it in that way. So this is really going to be an involved discussion with each other. Jim and I will moderate and referee, but otherwise we want everyone to sort of have at it with the best information possible. So we also invite questions from the audience. Prolesta Hollingsworth, who is standing over here for many of you to see, he will be passing around index cards. So if there are questions that you have, please jot them down and identify yourself so that I can read your questions out if time permits. We're going to be getting questions. We're streaming live, so we're going to be getting questions as well. I invite our online guests to submit their questions at livequestions@fcc.gov. That's LIVE questions@fcc.gov. So online participants can engage as well. We're going to go. We got started a little bit late, but I think we're going to go for about 45, 15 minutes. We'll take a break. And a brief break, and then we'll come back in for the second half. I've sort of looked at this as two parts of the same coin, which is, the first half of this, we're really going to try to diagnose the industry, talk a little bit about what's going on, and then just organically, the second half, we'll get into prescriptives. We'll get into, as the agenda suggests, we'll get into what we think may be possible solutions. Again, this is a collaboration. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jim Winston, who has a couple welcoming remarks as well.
Thank you, Tom. I want to begin by thanking you and the Commission for holding this event. It's the first of its kind, and something that we at NABOB have needed for some time. I am the president of NABOB, the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. We are a trade association representing the interests of African American owners of radio and television stations across the country. We've been in existence since 1976, and we have seen our numbers of owners grow during that period of time and then start shrinking in recent years. And as a result, we find ourselves very challenged to maintain the success of our existing stations. And obviously, if you're a broadcaster, your success depends upon getting advertising dollars. In 2012, the Congressional Research Service did a report. At that time, it showed that federal government agencies were spending about $500 million a year on commercial advertising. Subsequently, as Tom pointed out, that number now appears to be closer to $1 billion. And it showed that the largest advertiser, commercial advertiser in the federal government is the Department of Defense. So I'm delighted to see Ms. Williams here representing that huge budget. And hopefully our conversation here will help us figure out ways for our members to get involved with DOD. So what we have found is that there is a great deal of money being spent, but there's very little information about where that money's going. The agencies pretty much do the same thing. They all have a major contract with one huge advertising agency, usually a Madison Avenue advertising agency, for these huge contracts. And they give that when they enter into these advertising contracts, they give the advertising agency obligations to spend money with small businesses. But beyond, and then they get a report each year from the agency that says what they've done in terms of spending money with small businesses. Unfortunately, as a result of a Freedom of Information Act request that NABOB filed, I got a chance to see what those reports look like, and there's no information. It really is just they fill in a number. They say we spent money. 13% of our money was spent with small businesses, and there's no detail with those reports as to what that means, where that money go, what companies, how is it spent. And so we have been looking to find information on the behind the scenes. What does that actually mean? NABOB has been working with the Congressman Hank Johnson who's from Georgia, who's on the Armed Services Committee in the House, and he has been helping us try to get some information. We've gotten some information through Congressman Johnson's office, but still we need further, even more detailed information about where that money is being spent. So I hope that one of the things that will happen today is we'll make some connections certainly with DOD and with other agencies that are represented here, to figure out how do we go beyond those generalized numbers to get to actual details and figure out how African American and other minority-owned companies can start receiving some of those advertising dollars, because it's clear from the information I have from my members that we're seeing very little of that money, and we are a significant part of the advertising industry. One of the interesting things we found in the information we did get from the Department of Defense was that some of them were spending $0 in advertising on radio, and these are national advertising campaigns. And if you are a commercial advertiser doing a national advertising campaign, you're going to spend about 10% of your budget on radio. So we're trying to figure out what advice these agencies are giving to the Department of Defense that causes them to think that to recruit minority recruits, you wouldn't use radio. So there are a lot of questions that we hope to start getting additional information on how to address this issue. So I'm looking forward to the discussion with all of the members of the agencies, and hoping that we'll figure out some ways to drill down to some of that information.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a moment now for all of our panelists, sort of starting in my immediate left after Jim, to take a minute to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do and their organization, starting with Ms. Jean.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Glad to be here. Glad to see all of you here today. My name is Leslie Jean, and I work for the U.S. Department of Transportation under the Office of Small Business Development Utilization. I am the current director of the Capital Region Small Business Transportation Resource Center, which is a joint partnership with the U.S. Black Chambers. What I do in my role is I help small businesses get access to federal transportation contracts and procurement opportunities, as well as provide them access to capital, bonding, and education surrounding the transportation field. We try to eliminate some of the barriers that they have in entering the field, as well as eliminate some of the barriers they have in receiving contracts.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melody Spann-Cooper. I'm a second-generation owner of Midway Broadcasting Corporation. It's a company my dad started back in the 70s, and you all have got to let me savor this moment. My parents sent me to typing school when I was 9 years old. By the time I was 11, I was typing about 85 words a minute. A lot of his papers that he filed to get our stations, I did them. So how awesome he would feel. He's still alive. He has Alzheimer's, to know that I was sitting on this panel today. So I am honored to be here. We represent the best of what the FCC allows people to have license for, and that's to serve community. WVON is the oldest black-oriented radio station in Chicago. It's been around since 1963, went on the air, and the call letter stood for the voice of the Negro. And since then, it has been the voice of Black Chicago. So there's no surprise that you'd get a black president out of Chicago. It's because of VON. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But we do have two stations there. I have a Hispanic station, and I am there leading my company, my father's business, and proud to do it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sherman Kizart, and I'm the managing director of Kizart Media Partners, which is a media sales consulting firm that's based in Chicago What my company does simply is I work with broadcasters, or I should say traditional media companies such as radio, television, and print, as well as new media companies, including digital. And what my company does is has a very simple and straightforward proposition in how I work with these media owners, is I leverage my relationships with the country's leading national and global media buying agencies to generate more ad dollars for my clients across all media platforms. That's the focus of what Kizart Media Partners does, and I work with broadcasters, names that you would know, ranging from as large as a Radio 1 to individual owner-operators in markets like Chicago, such as Midway Broadcasting in Chicago, who we just met with WVON. And that whole focus in terms of what I do stemmed from the 25-plus years I've worked in both local market radio and television, primarily in a senior sales manager role in markets like New Orleans, Chicago, and Memphis, where I worked in local markets. And I spent 15 years running the national radio efforts for the country's largest national radio rep firm, which is Interrep. So my entire professional career has been focused on working with broadcasters, primarily minority-owned and minority-targeted broadcasters, and helping them to generate national, regional, and local revenue from media agencies and national marketers. I wanted to certainly take a moment to say to Tom, congratulations on your continued advocacy and providing platforms to address serious business issues that are impacting minority-owned broadcasters, and you and the commission should be applauded for your efforts, and I think he deserves a round of applause for creating this forum today. When the opportunity came about for this discussion, I actually was in Miami on yesterday and the day before with the 4As, or the American Association of Advertising Agencies, and I'm looking forward at the appropriate time to talk about how some of the discussions that were taking place in Miami yesterday, and they're taking place today and tomorrow, that have a significant impact on the things that we'll be discussing today, particularly as it relates to how these government agencies whose advertising and marketing budgets are as large as some major corporations, but there's a real disconnect in terms of how they value relationships and doing business with principally minority-owned broadcasters. So I'll wait at the appropriate time to talk a little bit more about that. But it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
I'm actually glad you were down there, because we invited 4A to come, but for some reason they didn't want to come up from Miami to join us here for our conference. So,
well, only for you, Tom, that I flew here late last night.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Fleming Williams, and I'm Senior Deputy Director of OCBO.
That was quick. Hi, good morning. I'm Steve Roberts. I'm President of Roberts Companies. Good morning to all of you who are participating. Thank you for coming. Tom, Carolyn, Calvin, and the OCBO team, thank you again for the invitation. I've had the privilege to work with you on the FCC Diversity in Media Committee task force that has been in existence for many years. It is an opportunity for many of us to share what's happening in the field of not only radio and TV, but all the electronic media, internet, and on. So it's good to be back with you again today, Tom. Thank you. Also, I serve on the board of directors at NABOB. And so when I speak not just as a singular owner of a broadcast property, but I also speak as a part of a team of folks with Jim Winston who lives and breathes telecommunications every day. So we kind of speak as experts. And then recently I was appointed to the MMTC board. My friend Janelle is here today, so you will probably hear from her because she has also been in the battle representing a diverse group of clients from all over the United States trying to get equity in terms of advertising with both the private and the public sector. A little bit quickly about my background. I have been in the broadcasting and cellular phone business for over 25 years. We are a unique entity here. I have owned TV stations, about 15 over the last 25 years, and radio properties. I've also been in the telecom business. We've built a whole Sprint network in the Midwest, and we are still presently in the tower business. So I come from a number of different perspectives, but today I want to share with all of you our exposure to contracting with the federal government from an advertising point of view, which has kind of been a one-way street to a degree. Everywhere we have built a broadcasting property, we always go primarily in the minority community. We train people who would never have an opportunity to work in TV and radio. And so part of that, we would always encourage and be very active in our community involvement. So we would do parades and neighborhood organizations. We're working with neighborhood organizations, community groups, and always a part of it, for instance, Ms. Williams would be working with the whole recruitment effort for DOD. And we would always do that every year, all of our stations, all of our markets across the country, because we thought that was important for the children of our community to have an opportunity to understand there is another way out of maybe difficult times. But as I said, and we'll talk about in a little bit, it was always a one-way street. We do the freebies, but not receive any benefits from it. So I know that's the nature of our conversation, Tom, and I have some additional facts and figures to share with this group about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Alice Williams. I'm with the Department of Defense, Undersecretary of Defense, Office of Small Business Programs. First, I want to say I'm very delighted to be here. I've already heard some of the concerns that's been spoken already. Hopefully, I'm prepared to try to address some. But more importantly, I think it's going to be very important today that I'm able to explain the actual procurement process to you and help you better maneuver into the acquisition process. For the department, my boss could not be here today, Mr. Kenyatta Wesley. He fell ill and wasn't able to come, and so he asked me to participate. I'm a 36-year civil servant, 36 years acquisition process. So I've been predominantly Department of the Army, working the whole acquisition gamut. I'm very familiar with the process. I joined DOD back in October. I've been around for about 7 months now. I'm very excited to be here just to be able to address some of your concerns. We've done very well in the department in terms of meeting our socioeconomic goals. We got an A on our report scorecard with SBA. I heard your concern about specifically you talk about giving minorities contracts, but you don't specifically talk about the media community. So hopefully I can be able to explain that process to you. We do have a very robust media program. We spend about $300 million in total dollars spent in the media community. I can address it specifically by service and components that later in the discussion. In addition to that, we're headed again to meet our small business goals. Our spend today is about 21.26%. Our goal is about 21%, and we're about at 18 today. And so I also want to address more specifically about women-owned program as well. I heard the concerns here about women also not able to get opportunity in the media area. I manage the socioeconomic program overall for the Department of Defense. That's all categories to include women-owned and service-disabled vet. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope I'm able to address all your questions today. Hopefully we can walk away with some solutions. If not, I definitely can take some taskers back to the building to see how we better can support your mission. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Tim.
Hello, I'm Timothy Smith. I am the Chief of Enterprise Acquisition Center which is the procurement shop at the FCC. I have 8 contracting officers that work for me. I've been around several government agencies, the Mint, the HUD, ICE, and here. And I just want to say that the FCC, although we're in the business of media, we don't actually have any contracts for advertising. That's not one of our requirements, but I'm basically here to tell you, as Ms. Roberts, information on how the federal government does contracting and how to get in, if you're a minority-owned business, how to get the best deal and try to win more contracts. So thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Calvin Osborne. I am Associate Director for OCBO. I have been in OCBO for approximately 9 years. I'm really glad that my director, Tom Reed, invited me to participate in this conference. Had he not, he might have found a rabbit or something in his car. So I am primarily responsible for leading the regulatory flexibility team, which consists of about 6 or 7 attorneys here in the agency. We review every single rulemaking that comes out of this agency for its effect on small businesses. And we probably will review upward of 200 regulatory, 200 or so items just over the course of the past 12 months.
Thanks, Cal. And I understand we have Chanel Bankston Carter on the line now. And Chanel, if you're there, if you could to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your organization. She's with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
All right. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Chanel Bankston Carter. I'm the director for the Department of Veterans Affairs, OCBO, which is all disadvantaged business utilization preference with small and veterans business. Here at the Department of Veterans Affairs, before I start and say that, I want you to know that I was so intent on attending this event that, as I told Thomas, I have a torn MCL and a torn meniscus now, and it's very difficult for me to get around. But the Department of Veterans Affairs is very committed in working with veteran-owned small business, service-disabled, minority businesses to look at opportunities for procurement. And we have not been able to participate in a dialogue of this magnitude. And it is truly an opportunity for us to share ideas, strategies, and come together to develop a partnership that will benefit the small business community. In my position here at the Department of Veterans Affairs, my sole purpose is to work on procurement, expanding procurement opportunities for the small business community. VA is the only federal agency that has a verification program. So in that order, we have a hierarchy that focuses on service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, veteran-owned, small disadvantaged, women hub zone, etc. And as a result of that, there are sometimes the case when it comes to advertising, broadcasting, etc., that the opportunity to be more diverse has really, and to be competitive in that market from the Department of Veterans Affairs perspective of looking at the veteran-owned small business community has really been something that we have struggled with, that we work with, because we do have a lot of opportunities for marketing, advertising, and we do use that. So I would just like to say that we are open, we are invested, and I am very humbled to be on this panel today to discuss what we currently do with procurement opportunities for small business and how we can play a role in helping you to access the Department of Veterans Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. And Chanel and I did talk. I was wondering what team she played for to get that kind of an injury. So, but I thank you for joining us, Chanel. She definitely made a special effort to make sure that she could participate. So we're really appreciative. So I'm just going to put the first topic out on the table. I think it was mentioned, and I think, Tim, you actually alluded to this by pointing out that the FCC really doesn't have an advertising requirement. And certainly when Jim and I first started talking about this, so the general public doesn't think of the federal government as being an advertiser. Beyond DOD, we see those ads. We don't see a lot of other examples of advertising from the federal government. So it was enlightening to me to see how much money was truly being spent, the close to $1 billion. And we looked at the Congressional Research Service reports over the last few years and seeing how active the federal government was. Not surprising that DOD was the biggest spender in that. But other spenders as well, transportation, HHS, Veterans Affairs, some of you that are represented here. So one of the issues with government advertising is that it can be controversial and if it conflicts with a citizen's view of what the proper role of government should be. And that can sometimes circumscribe, how federal agencies elect to do their advertising spend. So the first topic I kind of want to put out generally is with that in mind, and the first part of this really is to our representatives from the federal agencies. What is your procurement process when you're looking at advertising? How is it constrained by, what you're limited to advertise about? And how do you go about, once you've decided what your mission will be, how do you go about seeking advertisers? Do you have it? Is it shopped internally? Do you have an internal shop of individuals that seek advertisers, or do you use outside consultants and advertising agencies? But generally, let's talk about that advertising process. And for those of you on our panel who are on the broadcast side, are experts that are trying to achieve a business relationship with the federal agencies and seeking advertising dollars. Let's talk about your experiences, your successes, your failures, your frustrations. So I'm going to put that out. Maybe Alice, we'll start with you since you're DOD. You're the big guy in the room. Yeah.
Excellent question. We do have a whole major procurement process that we go through as we start to look at how we specifically advertise, particularly any acquisitions to include media. As it relates to media, just to give you some of the flavor of what the department has been going through over the several years, if you recall, we had a perfect storm. Most importantly, we had a sequestration that definitely impacted the budget constraints. For the first time in my 36 years, I've been laid off through furlough. And so with that said, the budget has shrunk. So what you typically would have seen 10 years ago, you're not seeing that type of money anymore. More specifically, if you look at the last administration under President Obama's tenure, the first term around, he specifically spoke about employment, increasing opportunities of employment. I think he's done an excellent job to do so. This administration has been about national security. So our major focus areas for the department has been on national security. What I would tell one to do is follow the money. Very specifically from the department, from the top of the food chain all the way down, we have a very strategic what they call a concept plan, basically identifies more specifically where the dollars are being spent. As it relates to advertisement, our budget and advertisement has decreased over the years, and we're probably running approximately about $300 million this year in advertising. Some of the requirements under advertisement will range from specifically awareness to include television, radio, out-of-home, digital repairs, partnerships, theater, lead generation, which is direct mailing, online type stuff, mobile and data fulfillment. And then there's the recruiting and sales support, which include collateral material, promotional items, incentive items, and content collection. Every service and component have a responsibility to do the procurement within their own organization. Typically, we do what we call in most organizations strategic sourcing. And many times people from industry, or we have experienced that industry believes that strategic sourcing is not a good thing. But as we start to follow the money, and what we believe is best for the mission of the organization, and more importantly, to get what we need for the warfighter, we have to look at more strategic buying, so buying things in groups and commodities. So support the strategic sourcing effort. Every procurement office have small business representation within their acquisition planning process, meaning every acquisition that goes out to include, as relates to social media or any media advertisement, is actually goes through this whole board where there's a small business individual that sits on those boards that monitors opportunities for minority or socioeconomic programs. And so when we go full and open competition, I heard a comment earlier about these major contracts. There's one big major contracts, and then you go out, and then they're required to go out and solicit to minority companies. Well, as we utilize it as prime contracts and subcontracting, those are the proper terminology for it. And so typically when we advertise, we do market research working with the small business advocates or professionals that's tied to the organization. And what we do is we advertise through FedBizOps, and we go out, and what we're looking for automatically based on historical spend, based on subcontracting efforts, we automatically go out and try to find minority companies to perform the work. So we do seek small business participation early on in the procurement process. That's the initial stage. Typically what happens when we put out a source aside or we make a request for information out to industry, we don't get the feedback that we need to actually set aside a requirement for small business. All it takes is 2 or more small businesses to respond to the RFI source aside. It automatically gets set aside. And so what happens is that small businesses don't respond. In addition to that, we highly encourage small businesses to team. So if you are in the media organization or company and say we have a large contract that you're not able to go after because of your financial capabilities or your past experience, we actually would team with other small companies. And there are many rules that came out in the NDAA, Small Business Act, that will allow you more flexibility to team with other small business, especially as it relates to subcontracting. And so that's the limitation of subcontracting, what basically says that if you get a prime contract, typically you would have to do 50% of the work. Well, now you and your team can make up 51% of the work. So if you have 5 people on a team, each of you can do 10% each. So we're trying to be a little bit more flexible in terms of legislation and policy driven to ensure that we get adequate participation in the procurement process for small businesses and minorities. And so it's really understanding the procurement process, working with your internal organizations, starting with your small business advocates internally at any organization that you go to. Where you see there is larger contracts that you're not able to compete for, subcontracting is another way to get great past performance. So we highly encourage you to work with your large prime contracts to help us do that. In addition to that, back in 2010 under the Small Business Act again, legislation required us to do subcontracting enforcement. That is something that has been a deficiency across the federal spectrum, not just the Department of Defense. So when we put in a prime contract and we put all these requirements in the prime contract for prime companies to actually assist small companies, we had no mechanism to enforce it. Now we do have a mechanism to enforce it because the law now says we have to do subcontracting enforcement. So anytime a prime contractor go and they use a small company to bid on requirement, by regulation now, if they use that small company, now they have to actually give that small company work. And then in turn, we enforce that. We make sure through the prime evaluation process, through surveillance and audits, that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And if they're not, they're penalized for it. So we're making a lot of headway, and we put in a lot of initiatives to ensure as the budget shrink and our contracts get larger, that we include small business participation in that factor. Thank you.
Any of our other representatives, Leslie, so you want to speak to that?
So for the federal U.S. Department of Transportation, our procurement process is very similar to DOD's. So our money is tracked through large transportation contracts. So in fiscal year 2015, we spent $43 million on advertising, and this year so far we've spent about $13.3 million. So we're on track to be about the same amount as we did last year. So our advertising contracts are wrapped up in larger contracts through prime contractors. So for example, we can award WMATA a contract of $100,000. And so through that, WMATA will go through and find subcontractors to meet their advertising goals. And so through that, we use DBE participation goals. And DBE is Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and that's a unique program for USDOT that specifically is geared towards helping minority contractors have access to large federal contracts.
Out of curiosity, when DOT advertises, sort of what is the focus? Is it just the effectiveness of transportation systems? What are you advertising on?
So there are different campaigns. So they have a buzzed driving campaign, drunk driving campaign, no texting campaigns, and then there also may be advertising goals around large projects. So the Silver Line coming out, the Purple Line, those are just local projects here that we may advertise around.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't want to let the FCC completely off the hook and out of the discussion here. There are, from time to time, rulemakings that the Commission adopts that has such a large or significant national impact that it has had advertising contracts. For instance, the digital transition, which Sherman was at the helm. There was a significant advertising budget for that effort, and many minority advertising agencies came and met with the Commission, met with our office, et cetera. That was prior to our No Urban Dictates policy, but there was an effort to try to make sure that minority firms were involved and got a piece of that advertising budget. And from time to time, for instance, with the broadband, et cetera, there are projects that the agency engages in that may have a substantial advertising budget along with that.
Okay.
Tom, if I can follow up on what
if I may,
Carolyn just...
if I may provide some information on the Department of Veteran Affairs, what we're currently doing is to ditto what the Department of Defense has said. But with the Department of Veteran Affairs, we have actually increased our budget has been increased by Congress, and also our advertising and marketing budget has increased. To that, but along with that, what has happened is that the department has their own internal broadcasting, networking channels. We have connections, communications, videos, etc. But we are being challenged by Congress, but as well as from our internal and external stakeholders, to use more advertising and marketing as an avenue and a venue to our veteran-owned small business community. Within the Department of Veteran Affairs, we continue to see the small business community grow. We also have seen that the military has continued to grow. With that growth has also come people that left or transitioned from the military. The Department of Veteran Affairs is in a very unique situation because we are vet first, not vet only. And in being vet first, our priority is to the service-disabled, veteran-owned small business community, the veteran-owned small business community. And to that degree, we have a procurement process that is in place. In our office, particularly, if a company, if an organization, whether it's our Veterans Benefits Administration, Healthcare, National Cemetery, IT, or any other organization or business line within VA that is interested in doing a procurement, our office is the office that has oversight to see if there are opportunities that's being given to the veteran-owned small business community. If it is not being given, if there is not an opportunity to provide an award or a procurement opportunity to a veteran-owned small business, our office will send it back to whoever that business line is and say, we need you to tell us, based on market research, why this is not being sent to a small business. And many times with that, what the Secretary has put in place is that if they cannot justify why it is being sent to a prime and not to a small business, it has to start at the top and justification has to be given. But our office is the one, we're sort of like the keeper of the door and the quality assurance in ensuring that the veteran-owned small business community has an opportunity to bid on our procurement as it pertains to not just with all of our procurements and even as it pertains to marketing and advertising. But I will tell you what we're running into is that, as I stated earlier, with the Department of Veteran Affairs, we have a verification program. And in this verification program, it is designed to give procurement opportunities based on our hierarchy of service-disabled, veteran, small disadvantaged, women hub zone, to give them an opportunity. What we are finding, and even as it pertains to advertising and marketing, because one of the things that we're finding through our VA transformation, and that is a huge initiative that is being overseen by the Secretary of the VA, where we are doing more outreach as it pertains to health care opportunities, employment opportunities, benefits, what the VA is doing for the veterans' engagement, the veterans' experience, the customer service, because those are things that we know that we must continue to enhance, that we must continue to develop. But as we are looking within our 7,500 plus veteran-owned small businesses that are verified, when we're looking at advertising, marketing, media, training, etc., we're not finding service-disabled or veterans that are minorities or women that are going through the verification process. Because through that process, there are things from the set-asides to sole sourcing that are available to the community. And what we are doing with our procurement, a part of the outreach, is that we're trying to go out within the community. We're partnering with the Center for Women Veterans, the Center for Minority Veterans. We're going into the community asking, can you help us to identify service-disabled or veteran-owned small businesses that meet these particular needs as it pertains to the advertising or media community? And to be quite honest, we are not getting a lot of feedback and a lot of success in finding those. And that is one of the things that I'm here online today for, is to discuss why not and what we can do to move that forward.
Chanel, this is Tom. You said, I just wanted to clarify, you said that you're not finding that service-disabled, veteran-owned businesses are going through the verification process, or did you say that women and minority-owned businesses aren't going through the verification process, or was it both? I wasn't.
Here's what happens is that in our program, and I said vet first, not vet only, is that in the verification process, that program is designed specifically for veterans to go through the verification. But we know that we have a lot of women that are veterans. We also have businesses, veteran businesses, that are in hub zone areas. And we have a lot of service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. But when it comes to advertising and marketing, when I go into the verification VIP, our system, to see of the 75, we have approximately 7,700 veteran-owned small businesses that are verified. Of those, we have less than 800 that are within the advertising, media, communications, marketing arena. And I know that there are more, but we are not getting them to, we're not getting people to go through the process and therefore have the opportunity to those set-asides or sole sources that we could give to a person in that specific category.
Okay, thanks. I want to give Sherman an opportunity to comment. I know you had a comment, and I want Tim to chime in, and then we'll move from there. So go ahead, Sherman, you had a comment.
Well, I want to follow up on the point that Carolyn Williams was making about the FCC having advertising marketing dollars that were targeted to the consumers, and she referenced the campaign that was maybe about 6 years ago that was focused on the whole conversion to digital. And what I remember vividly about that whole process was when we learned that number probably was closer to between $2 and $3 million that the FCC was approved by Congress to spend as a part of that campaign and around the conversion of the analog to digital, and working with the commission around how those ad dollars would flow to the broadcasting community. I think it was $2.5 million that was earmarked for radio. And the way the process works, whether you're the FCC or the Department of Defense or the others, is that most of these government agencies are using global media advertising and media buying companies to execute their campaigns. So that the dollars are appropriated the way they're supposed to, and you have entities like, I know around that conversion to digital, the FCC used Burr-Marsaller, and once those dollars flow to that PR agency, they have their own ecosystem, for lack of better analogy, in terms of how they go about going to market, who they choose as their media partners. It's a government contract, but still, but when it gets into the hands of a global media buying entity, all bets are off in terms of, is there going to be any assurance that those dollars, or any of those dollars for that matter, are going to flow to minority-owned broadcasters like a WVON or a radio, who else for that matter. And it was only through my interaction with people like Carolyn, and Carolyn, I'm struggling to remember who was he was a director in Commissioner Adelstein's office. He's at
Frank Montero?
Not Frank, but it was only in working with Carolyn, the director, one of the directors in Commissioner Adelstein's office. He's over at Comcast now.
You're talking Rudy Briochet.
Rudy Briochet. It was really only through working with Rudy Briochet and with Carolyn where we was able to keep the pressure to say to Burr-Marsaller, who's a PR company who hired, so they're the primary contractor, and they subcontracting to a media buying agency, all a part of that contract. But again, that ecosystem, the way it was set up, that those dollars still weren't necessarily going to flow to NABOB members unless there is someone saying, hey, who's agitating, who's saying to them, we know that these dollars being earmarked for consumers, and that NABOB members are an important part of this consumer group, and that we should be included. And now, coming out of that, some of the broadcasters, like maybe Radio One and some of the others, did get some of those dollars. So it's part of what I think becomes important today is whether it's as I refer back to that FCC process, or the discussions that we're going to have with the Department of Labor, the Department of Transportation, or the Department of Defense, is we understand that there is a process that you go through in terms of contracting, and we understand that some that dollars are flowing. But I wanted to follow up, Ms. Williams, on your comment, and this is a very real example. I would ask you, what's your relationship with Mark Davis? I would ask you, what's your relationship with Larry Stubblefield? Mark Davis is the Assistant Secretary of the Army, and he runs the research marketing group at the Army. Larry Stubblefield is the Assistant Secretary for Diversity for the U.S. Army. And I had it was as eye-opening of an experience as I've ever had in my life about how the Army does or chooses not to do business with us based on a conversation who's controlling the Army's multi-billion-dollar ad budget. I was invited to the Army's All-American Bowl in San Antonio a year ago, where Mark Davis, who's the Assistant Secretary for Marketing of the Army, was there. Larry Stubblefield was there, and this is what Mark Davis told me. He said that even as a person who controls the Army's budget, who's part of the Department of Defense, I can't meet with you. You can only meet with the people at Universal McCann, who has the multi-billion-dollar primary contract for the Army. Now, there are some entities below Universal McCann that's executing, but to me, we're talking about, this is an entity that's basically spending our tax dollars in terms of advertising and marketing, and we can't have a conversation with you about how we can potentially do business. I see a disconnect there. So I think we get, Ms. Williams, the fact that there is a process in terms of how you go about contracting. But I think if you're not hearing this from those of us who are broadcasters, who are working with, whether it's Mark Davis, and I know that Carol H. Williams Advertising has or has had an Army contract, but they're still, in order for the dollars to flow to NABOB members or minority broadcasters, or where they're flowing to a WVON in Chicago, and not that there isn't a place for an iHeartMedia and how they do business, because they have stations that target us as well, but there has to be, Ms. Williams, a different level of engagement in your office with the Mark Davises of the world and with your agency partners at Universal McCann and your agency partners at Carol H. Williams to say, these are our, they're only dealing with you. They have someone who deals with you in terms of understanding how the process works. But there has to be a different level of engagement in how you touch.
Absolutely, sir. You have a very legitimate concern, one that definitely need to be addressed. I know Mr. Stubblefield personally. He's no longer with the Army. He's actually with SBA now. Needless to say, is really about making sure you connect with the right people. And so there's a difference between where you start your process and where you end your process. Typically, people would like to start with the people who spends the money. And so you're talking about the program managers versus the individuals who's responsible for oversight of the small business program. For over about 19 years, up until last year, Ms. Tracy Pinson, who since has passed, used to run the Army Small Business Program. Now that individual that runs the Small Business Program is Mr. Tommy Marks. If you've not had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Tommy Marks, I will personally get you an introduction to him. Mr. Tommy Marks is responsible for the Department of the Army's overall small business program, reporting directly to the Secretary of Army. People like Mr. Stubblefield and others are colleagues of Mr. Marks. Typically, they're the individuals who's responsible for creating the requirement. When you start with the Small Business Office, we help them define and shape the acquisition strategy, meaning those who is interested in doing business as a small business or minority, and you really want to get into the right people and talk, you want to start in the Small Business Office first. We're your strongest advocates. We're your biggest advocates. And so the way you get into the department, whether it's at the Department of Defense or any of the services components, we ask you to start at the Small Business Office. And from there, we will help you market yourself into the department, whether it's the Mr. Stubblefields of the world or others. Now, the response that Mr. Stubblefield gave you, I have no control over.
No, Mr.
He just
Stubblefield,
clearly did not. Okay.
No, I want to be clear.
Right.
Mr. Stubblefield, that wasn't the impediment.
Okay.
The impediment was at the Assistant Secretary of Marketing,
Okay.
at the Mark Davis.
Right.
Mr. Stubblefield was someone who was saying his position, frankly, was, I thought, was a supportive one, where he wanted, as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Diversity,
Right.
it's in his interest.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
It's in his interest
Absolutely.
to want to help create what I would call a strategic alliance and strategic partnership with all different kinds of minority entities, including us.
Absolutely.
The impediment that I saw and heard firsthand was from the person who's controlling
Right.
$1 billion of the Army's marketing budgets. And when I look at how they're spending that money, if I go to a NASCAR event, the biggest sponsor of NASCAR is the U.S. Army.
Right.
You know,
One of the challenges we have is I could just really just continue to try to expound on your concern. Again, I say we don't take it lightly. I'm personally very concerned about your comment. Unfortunately, some of those people who are in charge of dollars don't understand their own procurement process. That's one of the challenges that we have, and there are people in place that really help and direct and shape that process on their behalf. And so it's very important before you leave this building that you clearly understand that there is an individual that's an advocate on your behalf that would be more than happy to sit with you and any of your other colleagues to talk about this whole process. I'm very familiar with the Army's advertisement contract. I happen to be one of the small business advocates back in the day working on that contract. I understand how that process actually worked. Our goal today is really to make sure that you get full opportunity to participate on any acquisition strategies that we have, to include the advertisement one. And we want to make sure that you have a better and clear understanding of how to do that. What I'm telling you specifically is that really start with the Small Business Office. Again, Tommy Marks is the newly appointed Senior Executive Service member at Department of the Army, working directly for the Secretary of the Army. I'll be more than happy to do an introduction on your behalf and personally take your concerns back to Mr. Marks so we can start some dialogue and start working on some partnerships on this effort.
I want to give Steve and Melody an opportunity to chime in, and in fairness to Tim, I know Tim probably, his tenure here, digital transition was probably predated your tenure here, but we want to give you an opportunity to talk about that. But first, I know Melody and Steve have some comments.
Did you want to go first, Steve?
Let me go first. Ms. Williams, I really appreciate what you said. But for the folks who are from the different agencies who are here, it's very frustrating for us as entrepreneurs out here. I mean, we hire usually women and people of color in communities where they normally don't get hired in this field. Also, they're good tax-paying, loyal Americans, and yet we're discriminated against by our own government in terms of our ability to hire people and to grow. I'll give you one minor case study. Again, we've been in TV and radio. We have a radio station in Jackson, Mississippi, the largest black-owned radio station in Jackson, Mississippi, in total Mississippi. We're number 3 in the market. We compete against the big boys, the iHearts, the Affinity Media. We control the 18 to 35 market for young people, primarily millennials, primarily black, primarily females. We're number 2 with the 25 to 54 group, okay? we go to the agencies who represent all of you and say, this is who we are, this is who you want to direct some of your ad dollars to, because if you're recruiting for the Army or the Air Force or Marines or the Navy, we know you want to be recruiting out of the African American community, let's say in Jackson, and yet you're not reaching them because you're putting all of your money in the, quote, number one station in the market, which is iHeartMedia, which, you know, covers everybody. Well, what your buyers will tell you is that, well, we cover the black community. Well, you don't cover the black community. You blanket the black community, you blanket the white community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, but you don't target to the community that you're trying to advertise toward. So that's a little bit of the frustration. So what we found over the years, we would come to government agencies and say, particularly the minority procurement officers, and that's none of you in this room, and we would say, we are trying to do business with the federal government. And they would then send us to the Universal McCanns of the world, who would then respond to us, well, you know, it's nice that you're a black-owned station or a woman-owned station, but if you're not number one in the market or if you don't have news, then we can't talk to you. And of course, so, you know, over the years you get a little frustrated and say, well, you know, we don't understand this. These are our taxpayer dollars that are supposed to be used to, you know, do business with all components of our community, particularly those who hire within our community, and yet nothing ever happens. So this is more of a information sharing that I understand that they will tell you, the agencies will tell you, and I know Sherman has really fought this for 10 years, they will tell you that, quote, they're doing business in the minority community, but they're not doing business with minority-controlled businesses or women-controlled businesses. They just don't do it. Okay.
Thanks. And I just want to follow up with Steve. I'm glad it went in that order. Representing a market like Chicago, of all the money spent by the federal government on advertising, I have not gotten $1. And so I come with what I think is a plausible solution. I think that we need to start looking at third-tier opportunities. Third-tier opportunities. What is that? It seems like we get lost kind of in, it's weird, we having a communications problem at the FCC. When you talk about verifications, well, you know, we send the information down and we never get it. Through a third-tier opportunity, you would go to your agency and you would say, African Americans represent 13-14% of the population of the United States. 13 to 14% of this budget has to go to African American owned entities. At that point, you don't have to worry about if they found us, if it's covered, if they missed us. Just 13% of those dollars are spent, and we figure out a strategic way to get them that down. And Steve is absolutely right. It is very difficult to compete in the marketplace when people say, okay, well, I'll buy iHeart, and they have an urban station too, and you're at an agency who the federal government may have a mandate and they really want to do business with African Americans. The agencies care nothing about that. And through a third-tier opportunity, I think it gives you an opportunity to cover all bases. It's verifiable. You know, the FCC knows that we're African American owned. They know that Steve's African American owned. We fill out all these papers. They know. And if we work on a system towards that, you will see a vibrant, a more robust broadcasting industry, because more of us will be able to hire more individuals that look like us. Maybe we get more radio stations. But if we don't really drill down in a very sophisticated way at looking at how to channel specific dollars, allocated dollars, to African American owned, I think we'll be back here in the next 5-10 years with having the same conversation.
I want to give Chanel and Leslie and Tim an opportunity to sort of chime in on this if you have thoughts with respect to this issue. Tim.
Is this on?
Yeah.
So I like the idea of third-tier opportunity. That would probably be beneficial, but federal government agencies are under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, and that would have to be something done in Congress. The Congress would have to change the rules for how we do business with minority-owned businesses. Right now, we're required to maintain social economic goals, and every government agency has to commit to certain goals for how much dollars are going to disabled veteran-owned business, hub-zone businesses, all kinds of other veteran goals that we have to meet. The FCC itself has a very good record of exceeding our goals every year. I wasn't involved. I've been here since 2011, as Tom was saying. I wasn't aware of the DTV, how they did that acquisition, so I'm sorry I couldn't speak to that. But one thing I do need to tell most of the businesses that are attending this meeting is just the details of how you make yourself known to the federal government, and if you want government contracts, and if you're not aware of it, there's several things you really need to do. Is number one, contact the SBA, Small Business Administration, and get certified under one of the social economic programs. That way you can get certain types of government contracts are awarded. It could be directly awarded to you. It could be set aside just for people in that class of the social economic program, or the only people that can bid on that program. So contact the Small Business Administration and get in there. The next thing is make sure you're registered on the website www.sam.gov. That's where you actually put your certification in of what type of business you are, and it's actually you can't really do business with the federal government unless you're registered on that site, because most government agencies draw the banking information and the other information, tax information about your business directly from that website. And the third thing is the website called www.fedbizops.gov, and that is where the government advertises a lot of its business opportunities. We put solicitations in there, we put requests for information in there, and that's a lot of government agencies go there to do their market research to find out who's out there that wants to do this work. So you can actually get an account on this website, and whenever any kind of information is posted for any agency, you can actually find a way to where it'll send you an email saying there's something out there from the FCC in advertising. So click on this thing, and it'll let you. It'll notify you of the opportunities there are out there. So that's really all I have to say on it. Thank you.
I just wanted to interject because there's a dichotomy here. If you are a broadcaster, you're not looking for federal contracts because the contracts are going to advertising agencies, and the structure is this. The federal agency issues a contract to Universal McCann or somebody, and Universal McCann then is given these obligations to do subcontracting. So they may subcontract to a minority-owned advertising agency such as Carroll H. Williams. The problem comes down is that after Carroll H. Williams is given that contract, Universal McCann controls what it is they actually get to do. And so what happens in practice is that Universal McCann says to Carroll H. Williams, we want you to create a commercial targeting the African American community. Carroll H. Williams creates that commercial, and they always do fine work. Universal McCann then says, okay, we will decide where that commercial runs. And that's the problem. Therein is the problem, is that it's Universal McCann who decides that they're going to turn it over to their preferred buying service, and their preferred buying service always buys the same stations. And it's universal to the buying service, to the stations. It's a pipeline that we are not in. And that's the problem, is that we need advocacy within the agencies to follow the money, as Ms. Williams was saying. You start at the top, but you've got to know where the money ends up. And where the money ends up always excludes us. So what we're hoping to do is to find advocacy within the agencies to help get to where does the money finally end up.
And sometimes that advocacy is as simple, Ms. Williams, as picking up the phone or in saying to the people at University of McCann, have you had a conversation with the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters? Are you having conversations with minority-owned media? It's sometimes as simple as this. Here's something that was really fascinating, Tom, that I'm bringing back from Miami at the American Association Ad Agency meetings that are, I said, going through Thursday of this week. For me, it was interesting to hear the way clients would be you, Ms. Williams, you, Ms. Jean, and some of the others, the perception and problems that these global media agencies and companies that you're doing business with, but the issues that they're having is one of trust, one of transparency, all things that would blow your mind, including issues involving racism and sexism. I mean, the CEO of J. Walter Thompson, one of the most respected advertising agencies in the world, was fired on Friday because of his behavior around interacting with a very senior colleague that was both racist and sexist. And another agency CEO was fired 2 months ago. So there's a whole plethora of issues that your agencies are facing around trustfulness, transparency, and their ability to do business with our community. And the only way that that's going to change, because some of the budgets that these government agencies, whether it's the Department of Defense or the Department of Transportation or even Veteran Affairs, their budgets exceed a lot of consumer market companies. So, and these budgets are our tax dollars. So we have a right to be able to be not just to be at the table, but to say there's a place for minority-owned broadcasters to get a piece of those dollars.
I would like to ask a question to you, sir, also to Sherman. My question is from the VA, is that have you all reached out to us? And when I say us, because where I sit at, my office, I work straight for the secretary. There's no wiggle room in between where we are. Also with that, and on that same pole, is Office of Public Affairs, our intergovernmental agency. So our secretaries for the health care for benefits. And as you look out in the market, you see that we do national marketing, we do national media broadcasting, digital media, the whole gamut. But I ask you that if you have reached out to the Department of Veteran Affairs, what are they saying to you, and who are you speaking to? I would challenge you to get my name and information from Mr. Reed and give me a call and say, Chanel, I would like to have a meeting with the people that have the dollars. And yes, there's the social economical category, status, etc., that was mentioned earlier that is set by SBA, etc. But also with the VA, we have a diverse population because the military is diverse. And if we're not advertising in the communities that look like us, that have that total makeup and diversity, we're also missing out on an opportunity. So vet first, not vet only. So the organizations that you're speaking of, your organization, have you contacted us? Have you said, I need a meeting? How do I find out about the My VA transformation? Because I know you have a lot of dollars, a lot of money. DOD does as well, but our dollars continue to grow because we have to reach the masses, and that's the only way we can do it is through marketing, advertising, media, the whole network. And but I'm not getting any of those calls, and I would ask you to call me and let me help you. And if you are speaking to someone, who are you speaking to, so I can get you to the right relevant person?
Well, the answer.
Chanel, thank you.
Yes.
Chanel, everybody in the room is about to start standing up and cheering.
Absolutely.
The whole hope of having this roundtable discussion was for us to find the right people to talk to. So we thank you immensely for that offer, and we will definitely be following up with you.
And we're optimistic because we know the Secretary of Veteran Affairs is a former CEO of Procter & Gamble, I think.
That's exactly right. And he knows it from a business perspective, yes.
Ditto for Department of Defense. Chanel, you could have said it better. Go ahead.
Is it possible? Is it possible for the people that are sitting in that room, a group, to maybe get to have the names? Because why not do this on let's not retail this, let's wholesale it. A retail is a one-on-one off. To be able to see in an environment where we can talk about what our requirements are, what our needs are, and give you the opportunity to say, I've looked at what the VA is doing, and there's a gap that you have in certain things, not in a negative way, but I want to make sure we're helping you to reach the masses. So because we've done our homework, there's a gap here, this is what we see that we can help you, VA, to get to the next level, this is how we propose to do it, and we can demo or show you how we get there. And do it in a way where we have more than one or two people, because trust me, it's more than enough work to go around. And if that is something you're interested in, that is something that I can arrange. But we need to be organized and structured, and then be able, once you get that opportunity to go in, you have to be able to play and step up to the table so that you can you can say, I don't just deserve to be here, I deserve to be eating with you as well, and then inviting you over for dinner to my house, too. I want to get that dialogue.
See, now, Chanel, now I know that injury was a football injury. We can all talk about that. By now I think everybody's figured out that I think I lied about that break. So we're just going to power on. I actually want to post a question from the audience, which I think which dovetails nicely on what we're talking about here. My preface, though, is I've worked with Tim. We've had some contracting obligations that we've tried to fulfill, and I know that the FAR is a Byzantine process. And bless all of you that do this for a living, and have been able to figure that out, to help us figure it out. So with that in mind, and given how complex the federal acquisition regulation is, and the sort of constrictions it places on contracting, and how federal agencies do contracting, that sort of is a preface to this question, which is, can we arrange joint meetings with the prime contractor, the agency advocate, and minority publishers or broadcasters? This would put perceived or real pressure for the majority agency to actually do business with African American firms or other diverse firms. So that I pose that part about the FAR. I don't know if the FAR imposes any kind of limits on that kind of top-down engagement. But I sort of put that to those of you from our federal agencies. What does the FAR allow us to do with respect to cross-pollination?
Right. Absolutely. That is a very good question. It's definitely an initiative the Department of Defense is already pursuing, especially as relates to subcontracting enforcement. We're very concerned of how prime contractors actually go out and select those who's actually going to be doing work with them. And more importantly, we want to make sure that they are including the right mix to include the socioeconomic categories. The small business offices in most Department of Defense have already started efforts and partner with large prime contracts to have that particular impact. And they're doing roundtable type discussions. First, trying to really understand what is the prime contractor's actual process in doing business with subcontractors, and then try to standardize that process so they don't have the flexibility to go out and pick and choose. One of the challenges that we have in terms of picking and choosing is that many times there are so many small businesses out there, whether it's in the advertisement arena or otherwise, that wants to piggyback or do a partner with the large primes, that they have a challenge, and again, they have trust issues. Who do we work with? What is the past performance? And so what we try to do is build a pocket of eligible, viable small companies that we can do referrals to. Unfortunately, the small companies would then have to sell themselves, but we put you in a position where we educate you, train you, and prepare you to do market research to these prime companies so you can start building better relationships with them. So it is happening. I'm very concerned about this community here. I had no idea until I'm sitting here to hear what I'm hearing today. So I really do take this serious. Chanel brought up a very excellent point about getting to the right people. I try to emphasize that early on in my discussion. And we're willing to partner with you, Chanel, and Department of Veterans Affairs to work with this issue with you. DOD is willing to work alongside with you. I plan to go back and brief the leadership on this very issue. And those major players who are interested in coming to the table, I ask you to let me know, because what we want to do is make sure that we facilitate and getting the right people in the room to start to having this dialogue. And if there's anything that we can do to help facilitate partnership, relationship, roundtable, further roundtables discussion, we're willing to do that. Just keep in mind, though, the issue about the three-tier approach. Very good idea, probably could happen, but again, that would take some legislative changes that you will be responsible for going after your local lobbyists or Congress or writing whoever your constituents are to make that happen. We're willing to support whatever the laws allow us to do. But the things that we do have control over, like at least sitting down and start having the dialogue to try to figure out where are some of the issues and what we can do, to come up with recommendations on what we can do to better facilitate opportunities for this particular category. And so I'll take everything back. I'll be willing to work and partner with Veterans Affairs, since we're the two largest components of the dollar spend in this particular area. But I really can't emphasize enough the opportunity to be sitting here, allowing me the opportunity to sit here and hear some of these concerns. And I do plan on taking it back to the department to see if we can start working on some of these issues.
Leslie, I want to give you thank you. Leslie, I want to give you an opportunity to chime in. I know you mentioned something that caused my ears to prick up, and you mentioned the purple line. So, something that, when you think about DOT and something that needs to be advertised, and obviously when we talk about the Metropolitan Metro, we've had some recent issues. So, in line with what we're talking about here, can you give DOT's perspective?
Yes. So I'm going to switch back and forth between the different hats that I wear, both with the U.S. DOT and the U.S. Black Chamber. So I come from a family of small business owners, so I understand all of the struggles that have been mentioned here at this table, the struggles of getting access to contracts. No one in my family has ever received a single dollar either from federal contracts, and this goes back for generations. So I definitely understand that. With the Black Chambers, we try to develop partnerships with organizations like NABOB so we can continue to advocate for what you all need and how we can better support your business and grow your business, and that includes access to federal dollars. So I definitely will be taking this back to our office so we can continue to have this dialogue and discuss this further. As far as it goes with USDOT, switching hats again, you asked the question earlier if we can arrange joint meetings with prime contractors and minority agencies. So here in the D.C. area, that is what I do. I develop relationships with prime contractors, and I try to work on getting them to increase their DBE goals, which is disadvantaged business enterprise, in their minority contracts. Some primes are more willing to do that than others, but what it takes is a willingness from the prime contractor to even set aside DBE goals and then actively recruit DBE organizations. So what I try to do is develop my own list of what we call at DOT shovel-ready contractors, subcontractors who are able to work with the prime contractor and receive those contracts. So we have different programs that we do throughout the states, and we work with MDOT, VDOT, DDOT, and the other local transit agencies to do that. And so with these meetings that we set up with the prime, we actually hold education programs. And it's a unique program that DOT does. We call them bonding education programs. But it's essentially a 6-week course between the prime contractor and the subcontractor. And in that 6-week course, we discuss the process of getting a contract with that prime contractor. So if we're working with Melody's construction company as the prime contractor, we'll sit down with Melody and say, what do you need from DBEs in order to bid on contracts through your company? We also cover requirements. We also cover if bonding is required, and that's something that's more specific towards the transportation industry. And if bonding is required, we bring bonding agents into the room, because at the end of the day, we want to get the minority contractors and the subcontractors and the disadvantaged business enterprises ready to get contracts with the prime.
So can I just ask a question, Leslie Jean? What has been the result of, have we seen subcontractors get business after you've taken them through the course on how to do it? Do you have any results to share with us, success stories?
Yes. So there are 13 SBTRCs throughout the United States. We cover the whole United States, including the territories. And so for our region, we see all of the regions actually see success. Every time we host one of these programs and these education sessions, prime contractors are pairing with the small contractors, and the small contractors are getting contracts. There's a success story down in North Carolina. A guy walked away with $1 million bond and a $750,000 contract. Excuse me.
Okay, as a result.
Yeah. As a result. And so that's just one of the quote-unquote larger ones, but we have these happen throughout the U.S. all the time.
So my question for the Department of Transportation is even more laser focused. Who is the global advertising media agency that has that primary advertising contract? We'd certainly like to know who that is and how you or someone in your team interfaces with that agency. And the second would be, how can we, post this meeting, have what I would coin an introductory meeting with that global media agency and NABOB around what are your strategic goals? Because that $43 million that you spent last year was earmarked towards any number of different initiatives. Like, I don't think you mentioned whether it was texting to drive or drunk driving, and maybe you do them in alliance with state agencies or what have you. But the dollars are flowing. Right. And that year to date, I think in 2016, the number you gave was like $15 million. That's already been spent. So dollars are being spent in advertising and marketing as we speak. I thought you're to use your term, ready to shovel.
Shovel ready.
Shovel ready. Yeah. NABOB members are shovel ready.
Right.
We're shovel ready.
That's right.
All we need is a discussion where you, as the client, you are the client of that global media agency or advertiser, where you say, we want to understand how we could work with an like NABOB. They're shovel ready around if that that 15 million is going to be an additional 30 or 40 million. There certainly should be a place where we get to work with your global advertising and media agency your primary contractor around that opportunity?
Okay, great question. I tried to find that information out before this meeting. I'm still researching that. My department mostly works with construction, with highways, airports, et cetera. So I'm not exactly sure who the large prime contractor is directly through DOT for advertising is, but if you give me a week, I promise I'll get that information to you. We can continue this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, in terms of, you talked about the legislation, and both this is something that Jim brought to our attention, and both the 2014 and 2015 National Defense Authorization Acts, there's language for the defense agencies to look at their commercial advertising contracts to make sure how they are targeting specific audiences. So I think there's some language already there to help support, get the ball moving in that direction.
I also have with me in the audience is my Legislation Affairs POC in the office, Ms. Ashley Scott. She and I did try to locate the report before we actually arrived. We was unable to, but we do have our staff back in the office trying to research that. So we will do our homework and really look to see what the department is doing in terms of some of the recommendations that was made in that report and ensure that we're in compliance with the regulatory statutory requirements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. With some of the time we have left, I wanted to touch on a topic I think that has been alluded to. One of the things that I'm hearing out of this conversation is that as we're using the large sort of advertising firms that have their own agenda, that cuts out a lot of women and minority-owned businesses because they're not traditionally tracking their strategies towards those media properties. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, and I think, Chanel, you mentioned this, is about national media campaigns. We've talked about that a little bit, but I want to get into it a little bit deeper. In 2011, the FCC released a report on the information needs of communities, the changing media landscape in a broadband age. One of the report's recommendations calls on the federal government to consider targeting existing federal agency advertising spending to local news media. The report also found that historically there has been a bias towards national media, particularly network television. This slant may result from the perception that national media are an easier and less expensive way to reach a large number of people. So I want to talk about whether or not we're still seeing, is that still the case? And how viable are local media strategies from a government perspective, an agency perspective. So I think maybe we can turn to our broadcast experts and they can talk about their experience as to whether or not they're being lost in the shuffle because the pitch is national and not local.
Yes. Yes and yes. I think that when you go to these advertising agencies, and Sherman can attest to this, they like to spend dollars where they're going to make the most money. So if it's television, which is where they will spend the bulk of their money because it's more lucrative and it's easier. We had a very interesting program that happened less than a month ago called the Madison Avenue Project, which came out of NABOB based on a meeting that we had in our conference last October. And we got together with the head of some of the larger advertising agencies to deal with this very issue. Our follow-up, at least in terms of our shop, has been that a lot of the individuals that we talk to, they're national buyers, so they're not necessarily representing individual opportunities for us. They want to buy on a national scale. And for organic stations like ours, who may not be represented by a national rep firm, we have no opportunity in that space. But I think that a lot of these agencies are focused primarily on television, and in a marketplace, a demo like African Americans, where we out-index listeners to radio and digital usage more than any other ethnicity, the money is sometimes not spent in its most effective way.
If I could follow My follow-up with that would be, certainly Melody is absolutely right. She makes an excellent point about the amount of profit that ad agencies, whether they're local, regional, or national, make based on their television, the television work, or having. It's sexy to have that television reel and what it can mean for the growth and the development of your business. But some interesting business dynamics are happening in the ad industry, as you may have heard me allude to earlier, in terms of the pressures that these agencies are now feeling from their clients around a number of different issues. You certainly heard me mention the whole importance of transparency, and that's stemming from how they're utilizing how they're doing digital media buying and that whole issue. That's number one. But certainly the greater pressure is on moving the needle for their clients' products or service. At the end of the day, that's why you hire an agency, and to the benefit of primarily radio, the thing that radio still does better than any other media platform, whether it's television, print, or digital, is that you put radio and oftentimes minority-owned radio and targeted radio, you put its ability to deliver results against any other media platform, it's usually not close. Because if Melody isn't moving the needle for her clients in Chicago, she can't stay in business. The whole thing that drives her business model around working with advertisers in the Chicago market has to be predicated on the fact that she's going to ring the cash register for clients. She's going to put butts in seats with selling cars. That's the thing that local radio operators, like whether it's Melody or Steve Roberts in Jackson, Mississippi, who's competing with major consolidators in radio, other media platforms, the thing that allows Steve to continue to be in business in Jackson, Mississippi, is that it works. And that's the thing that as I was listening to a lot of the discussions yesterday, because the average years that a chief marketing officer has in their job these days is 2 years. And what's driving that is that if you're not moving the needle for these global marketers, you're out. And that's going to work. That should work for those of us who are in radio, particularly minority-owned broadcasters. But we can't have that kind of impact on a national or regional marketer's business, Ms. Williams, Ms. Jean, if we're not getting the access to the right people and the access to the opportunities that are existing every day. With $45 million you spent, and nobody in the no-job community saw a penny of that. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that the Army is spending. That's just one branch of the service. We haven't even had a chance to talk about the missed opportunities that the U.S. Marine Corps, the Navy, and the other branches of service are missing because they're not inviting us the way they're supposed to. So Tom, I would say again, yes, there is a preference, or has been a preference, to want to utilize television, but what's driven that was a model that was in the agency's best interest. And the unique thing about the pressures, the pressures those guys are feeling right now are real. In 2015, there were over $185 billion in advertising and media reviews last year. So there were a lot of clients, a lot of global marketers, specifically Procter & Gamble, specifically Coca-Cola, who said to their global media agency partner, this dog won't hunt anymore. we're taking our $1 billion in ad budgets and we're taking them other places. That's happening, and those guys are feeling different pressure. And when you add the fact that they're also have been engaged in behavior in their own companies that were discriminatory and there was sexual discrimination as well. There's a lot that they have to do to right their ship. But the only way that we can right that ship is there has to be accountability where we can enforce it.
Yeah, just I know we're running out of time, but quickly to follow up, Sherman's right on point as is Melody. The millenniums, who are the fastest growing consumer markets in this country, if not in the world today, are very diverse in their buying and very loyal in their buying. They do not look at what many of us around the table look at, the CBS, NBC nightly news. They don't do that. They don't look at TV for the most part. They do listen to radio in their cars. They are very loyal consumers. And so what happens is, if you're in Jackson, Mississippi, for instance, or Chicago or Albuquerque, if you see that local DJ who's probably working for a radio station that is locally owned and private and primarily minority or women-owned station, they create an affinity, a loyalty to that particular brand. And what I'm saying to the procurers around the table today is that you're missing them completely. You don't know how to reach them because these national buys do not take in consideration this new millennium thought process that is today and will be in the future. And so we can give you that opportunity to get directly into these communities and impact these future consumers that we're talking about. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Steve. You actually raise a question when you talk about, millennials, and I'm going to try to pull this all together because I got a question from the audience that also talks about print. Backing up, one of the things I think it might be helpful to talk about in the last few minutes is there a disconnect with federal agencies? We're talking about, Sherman, you mentioned some of the companies that are coming under fire, and their global networks are not. They're recognizing that their global networks aren't sufficient. Do we have a disconnect with certain federal agencies where it's sort of like if it ain't broke, why fix it? Or if my methodology is expedient, why should I change? How can, and I think we address this anytime we're dealing with supplier diversity, if there's a service that a company has to offer, ideally that company has to sell their necessity to the buyer. Is there a disconnect that's happening with the federal government? Is our federal agencies sort of satisfied with their spend? Are we saying we're reaching the communities that we need to reach? Why should we use broadcast properties? Why should we use broadcast properties as opposed to new social media and digital media? I know this is a broad question. What about print? There are a multiplicity of avenues that buyers will look to in terms of spreading their message. So there's a question in there somewhere. But maybe we could talk about that really generally in the context of multiple avenues of spend. How do, particularly from our procurers, what's the best strategy for companies in terms of reaching you and selling the efficacy of their service?
If I could speak on that, yeah. From the Department of Veteran Affairs perspective, is that we have a very diverse population. We have people that after they finish serving in the military, they do not stay in the metropolitan area. They go back to their mom-and-pop towns, to the little country store that they have, and as a result of that, broadcasted media may not necessarily be able to get to them in a large. And although we have various different venues, what we found more and more is that when we start to look at social media, digital e-learning, etc., what we find, I'm going to have to get I'm going to have to come off for a minute because I'm getting some feedback from another office. So I'll come back on and answer that question because I would like to tell you what the VA is doing to make this happen. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Chanel.
I was just going to add that I think all of the above is still. I don't think all of us are sitting here, Steve and I, representing broadcasters, but clearly there are print media that deserve. You look at something like Johnson Publishing Company. I think, as Steve hit the nail on the head, is our authentic voice, whether it's traditional means or whether it's different kind of nuances that's happening now. I'm sitting here looking at Sheila Eldridge. Sheila has a program that is specifically catered for women. And she's in various markets, and she's got a national reach. Well, she may not fit in a traditional model, but she has a very powerful voice if, in fact, you have a campaign that's targeted toward women. So I think that our mediums have changed and there's so many things that are viable and still effective, and that we should explore all of them. I think to write off print would not be fair, but to Steve's point, the authentic voice of the African American community, what makes him uniquely different in his marketplace in Mississippi, is something that his competitors cannot touch and cannot reach. It's going home on Thanksgiving. It's that dinner that we eat. It's ours, and I think it's often overlooked because it's not a tangible object. But to have that relationship with stations like his and like a VON in Chicago, it goes beyond just, the cost per point or how many people that we reached. It is a relationship with community, and that probably stretches across the board. But none so apparent as in our community with our stations.
I want to give everybody opportunity. I think now it's noon. That sort of touches it off really nicely. If everybody has an opportunity to kind of give some closing comments before we adjourn. We'll start with Tim, I think.
Most of this discussion has been on a strategic level, and I'm more a down in the weeds kind of guy in my position. So I just want to reiterate that in the federal government contract world, you might be an associate member of NABOB, but unless you're actually registered as a certified 8A firm or whatever type of social economic program you don't exist as that entity until you're registered, so you won't get any contracts. So the basic issue here first, get registered, and then start monitoring Fed Biz Ops, and you'll see things come your way, hopefully. Thank you.
Alice?
Thank you so much. This has been a great forum. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel and try to address some of the issues and concerns that you are having from a DOD perspective. Again, I want to just reemphasize that we're willing and able to work with you. We will partner with the VA. You can come to Department of Defense yourself. You can contact me directly. What I did during the conversation is pass two cards down the table. One was my card, my direct card, my telephone number. The other one is typically what I don't do, but you have my boss's telephone number. Mr. Kenyatta Wesley is the acting director of the Office of Small Business Program, and I'll tell you he'd be very interested in some of the dialogue that has been discussed here today. The key to success, if I can leave anything with you, is I clearly understand what the concerns are. The key to success is really getting to the right people. My job is going to be going back to departments, making sure you get an opportunity to sit with the right people and start this dialogue of how we can start partnering better with you. And the relationship in terms of prime versus subcontracting. Subcontracting, I tell you, is going to be a little bit more challenging but we do have some influence, and the key to that is the influence piece. So once we know what the issues are, what the concerns are, we can help influence some of the processes. But we need you all to work with us and also work with the right people. Going to your program managers up to the secretary may not help, but the people who's responsible for the actual program, the secretary may be responsible for the management of the money and overall program itself, but he has people appointed in specific positions to ensure that you get what you need. I heard a lot about Department of the Army. Mr. Sheldon, I think this your name was, I'm sorry. Sherman. Mr. Sherman, please forgive me. Department of the Army, I am willing to do an introductional email introduction, telephone call introduction on your behalf to Mr. Tommy Marks, who is the Army's newly appointed Small Business Director. I think he would gain a lot of synergy to hear some of your feedback and comments and concerns about the advertisement contracts in the Department of the Army. Up at DOD, we can look at it from a DOD perspective, and we will look at looking at some of the recent legislation that's come out in some of these reports to make sure that we're in compliance, and we'll kind of follow that process. We can direct some of the requirements and instructions and policy relating to some of your current concerns if we know what the real issues and challenges are. So we're prepared to do that. I'm just looking forward to a follow-up. Thank you so much.
Ms. Williams, that's great. I mean, that is, I flew in from St. Louis last night, not knowing what the results of this meeting would be, but it's very, very encouraging because, like I said, I've been in this business for 25 years, and it's really the first that I've heard these kind words. For all of us around here, the world is changing, and our nation particularly is changing and becoming more and more diverse every day. So the way we do business has to change. There are too many of us, both because of our sex or because of the color of our skins, are kept out of the opportunity to do business with our great government and the billions of dollars that it spends every day. So, Tom, to you and your team, thank you for pulling this, again, what I called in the beginning, historic panel together, because I know it will lead to greater opportunities. And Ms. Williams and to any of the agencies, you can feel very comfortable that all of us who are entrepreneurs, who are station owners, that we will be happy to sit down with whomever, wherever, because I know Melody will fly all over the country for a meeting in a second. Ding, ding. And I will too. And there are others, there are approximately 200 NABOB members, member-owned stations and stuff. So that's a fairly significant impact upon communities all across the United States. So again, to OCBO and the full commission, thank you very much for this opportunity.
In 2011, the commission adopted an order promoting diversification of ownership in the broadcast services industry. And in that order, the commission stated that discrimination has no place in the broadcast industry. And so in the license renewal process, there's a certification requirement that there's no discrimination, certified that the advertising sales contracts do not discriminate on the basis of race or ethnicity. And by extension, I'd say discrimination has no place in the advertising contracts placed with agencies by federal agencies.
First of all, I want to say to Tom, thank you for giving us an opportunity, but also more importantly, creating this platform, and it's been consistent in the years that I know that you've been in this job as director at OCB, and we so appreciate you and are proud of the job that you do in creating these opportunities, including the conference, the annual conference that you put on around how can we basically be more inclusive in how we and how government entities are doing business. So thank you again for your invaluable leadership and that you've exhibited over years that you've been in your job. What I want to also say to both Ms. Williams and Ms. Jean. I know it's not easy when you feel like bullets are coming at you.
So collaborative.
So
collaborative.
So if your boss, the acting director, can retro that bonus or raise, you've earned it just by the fact that you've been very gracious, and certainly your spirit of wanting to work with us, because what you're hearing from broadcasters, minority broadcasters, is simply frustration based on their interest in wanting to do business. We're not asking for anything special. We're saying if collectively the Department of Defense is spending almost $1 billion in advertising and marketing, there should be a place for us. That's how we're saying. And the level when we understand, where the people are, who you've charged with to do business in that area. The disconnect for us, as Jim Winston, I think, put it very eloquently, is about how it's around execution. And the execution, it's not in your interest that your primary contractors or primary partners aren't being as inclusive as they could be. It's not in your interest, and it's not in the taxpayers' interest, because it's taxpayers' dollars. So, thank you for both of you, both to you, Mrs. Jean, and to you, Mrs. Williams, for the follow-up, because follow-through is everything around these kinds of platforms. It would just be a conversation where we're shooting those bullets at you, and you're if there isn't any real follow-up and follow-through. And we want to work with you. We know how to work with you. Ms. Jean, again, we're shovel ready. We're shovel ready. You should have coined that term, because I think that would describe how we are around our interest in doing business. And I am humbled that I had an opportunity, Tom, that for you to include me to be a part of this discussion. And I'm looking forward to the results in terms of next steps and how we move the needle. So thank you again.
Tom, thanks so much for this. And James, thanks so much for this spirited and robust conversation. It's interesting when people in a bureaucratic industry gets together with entrepreneurs, and it's a lot going on. Because for entrepreneurs, things seem to move so slow. So when I talk about a third-tier opportunity, and you tell me Congress, I'm like, okay, so that won't work, right? But I think that we can. So take third tier. Let's change the language to intention. What are our intentions? I'll go back to how I started talking about my dad. When my dad ran the house, we didn't have a lot of choices. When the government, much of this money you're in charge of and you spend it with an agency, they shouldn't have a lot of choices not to have an intention to do business with many of us at this table. And I think if we go to some of our larger partners and we say, you know what, NABOB is here, any other organization that we choose to do business with, at the end of this fiscal year, we want to come back and make sure that some NABOB members, we've moved the needle for NABOB members, not because it's the charitable thing to do, but because it's the right business model to do in this country. When we start having those level of conversations, I think the needle moves automatically without my third tier. Thank you so much.
Again, I'm very pleased to be here. For those of you that don't know, I just started with the U.S. DOT 3 months ago.
Oh, wow.
So all of this has been very informative, and I look forward to going back to my office and talking with our team about how we can better work on these advertising strategies for minorities. One thing I would like to reiterate, I think Tim mentioned this earlier, is certifications. Get certified in every single state that you do business in, because again, you don't exist to DOT unless you are certified, especially as a minority, woman-owned, veteran-owned, small business, disadvantaged business enterprise. We can't find you and give you a contract geared towards those categories if you're not certified in that area. And those certifications are mostly done through the states. Unless it's an SBA certification, you can go through SBA for those as well. I would also recommend membership in supporting organizations. I just left a session yesterday by the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority that focused on contract and procurement opportunities for disadvantaged business enterprises. So make sure you join those organizations and follow up with them, because they can advocate for you in a way that you can't do on your own. And again, I'm looking forward to going back to USDOT, and I will find out where those advertising dollars are going and how we can better make sure you guys are sitting at the same table.
Thank you, Leslie.
I want to begin by associating with Sherman's comments, thanking you, Tom, for not just today, but for your whole history of pushing to make successful opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. I really appreciate it. Today has been a major success, just because we were able to connect with Chanel Bankston Carter. I hope you're still there on the phone.
Yes, I am.
All right, Miss Leslie Jean, and I have to give a special shout out to Miss Alice Williams over there, because the DoD has always had the largest advertising budget. I have been throwing my head against a brick wall for several years trying to find an advocate, and I feel like today I found one. And I appreciate your being here. So thank you all for this great dialogue, and I look forward to a lot of follow-up that's going to be productive for all of us. Thank you.
Chanel?
Did you say Chanel?
I did. I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear. Just to mimic what everyone else has said, this has been a great panel to get feedback, to also have discussion, dialogue, and I feel like we're moving forward in developing a partnership, and that we're leaving here not talking just to be talking or having a conversation, but that it is something in which we're going to not talk but make things happen as a result of it, and I'm so excited about that. I would also like saying in closing is to get to know the right people. Being prepared is the first thing. It's because preparation will always conquer anything else when you're prepared. Number two is getting to know the right and relevant people that can have the power to make the decisions. Because anyone can talk to you, but if they don't have the power to make those decisions or the procurement opportunities, then they're just giving you a lot of smoke, and you want to get to the right people. I would say to you from a third perspective, as I go out and I communicate and outreach in the small community all the time, as I say, don't be afraid to take on simplified acquisition, to take on the small contracts, because unfortunate the world in which we live and how the government is, as well as the private sector, people stick with people that they know. They stick with that small business or company that can dot the I and cross the T, not necessarily because they're the best, but because they're low maintenance. I've been with them forever and a day, and they're low maintenance, and I don't have to work. I do a lot to make sure it's getting done. They give me what I need, not much more, but I'm okay with that. So as you are making the strides to connect and transition to say, I can do the job, take on that simplified acquisition so that they can see that you know how to dot the I's, cross the T's, you can surge, you have the capabilities, the cash flow, etc. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you're able to show that you can mitigate risk. Because we, as the buyer, and you as the seller, want to be able to show that risk is mitigated on both sides. And that is what, as we team together and join and we sit down and have that conversation and get you to the right relevant people, that awareness of what is available to you, gaining the access to the right relevant people, being able to show how you can mitigate risk, looking at the various procurement mechanisms from Fed, be it Fed Biz Ops to FBO to GSA schedule, etc., and then having the performance. Past performance does not necessarily mean what you did with the federal agency. It can be a combination of a lot of things, because at the end, all of that comes back to mitigating risk. The Department of Veteran Affairs, we have a diverse population, broadcasting, digital media, etc., because in those small towns, veterans are using social media more than ever now. People are connecting through the digital media, through e-learning, etc. There are ways of connecting, and we need you. And our first philosophy here at the department is to the small business community, the veteran-owned small business community. But as I said, we're vet first, not vet only. And there are opportunities available to you, and I look forward in working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. And stay off the gridiron, he'll quickly. This has been a real pleasure, putting this roundtable together. So I really want to thank all of you for participating, and in particular, I want to thank Tim and Allison and Jean and Chanel for being brave enough to join us in this open forum. I said collaborative. I didn't mention the sharp elbows, but I know, and those of us to stick with sports analogies, not a lot of room gets created if you don't have sharp elbows. So I appreciate you all and your willingness to come down and join us. And my team will tell you there were more invitations that were submitted. We won't name names, but there were folks who weren't as anxious to join us. So this has been really productive for us. Some of you have thanked me, and I really appreciate those comments, but this doesn't get done without my team. You see Carolyn and Calvin here at the table, Pearl and Maura, Celeste McCrae, and Corinne Barksdale, and Christian behind me who streams, and Sharon and Belford and others in our office that really work hard to pull these events together. So obviously without that team, we don't do this as effectively. So it's always a joy working with them and creating this platform. My good friends here on the panel, and Melody, I mean, obviously we just met, but clearly I feel like we go way back. Since I'm from Chicago, we had a conversation earlier about that, which I'll and Pierre, who's here, Pierre and I, her colleague, he and I actually play ball against each other. Not favorable results on my team's side back in high school. So this has been a throwback for me. Having WVON in the room, and obviously Steve and Sherman, a real pleasure. They've worked so long with our agency and with OCBO and Jim, goes without saying. In closing, I would just say we will continue our commitment. This was really, we went well past this hour and we just scratched the surface. So OCBO is committed to continuing this conversation, and not just this conversation. What are the additional action items that we need to employ to make sure that we're pushing this issue forward, and that the relationships that we're trying to facilitate get made and cemented, so that the federal government can reach out to communities effectively that it hasn't been in the past, and they can use more diverse owners, media owners, and property owners to get their message out effectively to communities that don't hear it as much as they should. I certainly commit our resources and our efforts to next steps. So with that, we're finally going to have our break. Thank you all for coming, and we're adjourned.